Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/the Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. Top of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lifeline. We're your hosts, life strategist and entrepreneur Bo Powell, social media influencer and owner of the Furrow brand, Lindsberg Petway, and yours truly, leadership consultant and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. You can visit us at www.simplybje.com and on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and now on YouTube. Today, we are honored to have Mr. Brad Edwards, a community leader, public speaker, a member of Dear Fathers, the premier media platform dedicated to telling stories for Black fathers, and he is the creator of Dads to Doulas, a movement to help fathers cope with grief. It is an amazing story, so we want to dive into this conversation. Mr. Edwards, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me today.
Man, we're glad to have you. We're excited to dive into this conversation. I think we were about to get into it before we actually started it. So I kind of blame Bo for that. He's a fire starter. So so before we talk about, let's talk about Dads to Doulas, because that's a big deal. Tell us about Dads to Doulas and how did that initiative begin?
Yeah, man. So Dads to Doulas is really birthed out of my own personal situation. In 2017, I lost twin boys. They were stillborns. And prior to that experience, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I can't say that that the medical system did anything at fault, but I do know that I was unprepared, not educated, and not trained for what the possibilities could be. So going into my birth of my daughter in 2020, I reached out to a great friend of mine, Kyra Betts, who was the lead facilitator for Dads to Doulas, and I knew she was a doula. She spoke very highly about maternal health and how do we combat this crisis that is plaguing the Black community, and she helped me develop a playbook. So I remember from the experience with the boys, oxygen levels, blood pressure for mom, the heartbeat for the baby. I knew that they told me that they need to be these certain levels, or these certain levels would be detrimental. So I started asking questions. Hey, can you help educate me and help me understand things, so when I go into this labor delivery room, I'm better prepared. At the same time, I was working on a project called Melcura Health with some Fiskites I went to school with, and our focal point was maternal health. So I interviewed several women that had all type of education levels, financial means, and all that kind of stuff, and they all had these traumatic experiences and stories. And the one common thing that I saw was these were preventable situations. Had someone been there to advocate, has someone been there to listen from the medical system, some of these situations could have been avoided. So me understanding all that, I knew that it was some things I had to do on my end to prepare for this. So we went to the birth of Carriel, and everything was fine, no issues. And when I fast forward to 2024, I reached out to Kyra, shot her a text, hey, can you educate me in the same way that you did for me? And her answer was yes. I was like yes, we could do this. She said yeah. So the next day I called her back on it, and you know we didn't know where we were going with this, but she literally wrote a 45-page curriculum. And she was, she's been a trainer. She's, had hundreds of births that she's been a part of. And she took the experiences that she's had from her births and her clients, her understanding me and what I went through, and just understanding that nothing like this exists for Black men, which is a very, specific group, because women of color obviously have way more issues with the medical system than giving birth than in any other race. And she wrote this beautiful program. And to date, we have had over 160 men that have come through, whether it's the 6-week cohorts or it is the virtual workshops. And this is spanning over 26 different states. So these are guys that are coming in, some are the expecting father for the first time. Some are, aged out where they're like 55, 60 years old, but they're community fathers. They have young men and young women that they deal with every day. So they're learning this education so they can inform them of what they need to look out for and what they can do different. And then you have young men that are 21, 22 years old that are not looking to have kids anytime soon, but because they understand what the importance of this situation and this issue is, they're coming in to educate themselves so they can go into whenever they do have a child, they could be prepared for that.
That's
So Dads and
amazing.
Doulas is really a program built to give men a high level doula education and training. Not particularly to make them doulas to go out and perform these different births, but to educate them and start this conversation within the community.
For people like me that aren't familiar with the term doula, explain what a doula is.
Yeah, so a doula is a non-medical support person for birth. Like my brother said, he had his granddaughter had a home birth with a doula present. So a doula is not a medically trained person, so it's going to be different from a midwife and obviously different from OBGYN. But a doula knows how to care for a woman in a lot of different ways that your medical professional may not, because they're there to, they're a surgeon, right? They're there to
Right.
perform in the medical sense.
Okay.
All right. So, dude, this is major, man, because these are conversations that men now really want to talk about. And I don't think this is a new occurrence. I think men have always wanted to have these type of conversations, but it just wasn't safe to do it. And so this work that you're doing, man, I think is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now, you also have a program called Dear Fathers. So talk to us about how did Dear Fathers begin and what are some of the next steps for Dear Fathers?
Yeah, so Dear Fathers is the platform that everything is
Mhm.
birthed out of Dear Fathers, and Dear
Okay.
Fathers really created by Jesse Alex and Lamar Johnson,
Yeah.
two of my good friends that are also from the St. Louis area, and really they created because neither one grew up with their father, and they would always have these conversations about all these different things that they didn't know how to do because they didn't have a dad, right? I don't know how to change a
Mhm.
tire. I don't know how to make a adequate barbecue grill fire or change oil. So, they would have these conversations about, man, like, I don't know 50% of who I am because I don't have this relationship with my father. So they created this platform it's a media-based platform. So there's a writing series like Dads and Deliveries or Fearless Fathers. We even have one for Black women called My Daughter's Memoirs, where Black women have the opportunity to speak, to tell stories about their father's presence or lack thereof, and what that has done for them in their life. And for me, being a girl dad, I think it's very important for me to read these stories so I can understand really the role that I can or cannot play in my daughter's life.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times, was having different lived experiences, shared lived experiences. There's so much that we can learn from each and from things that they're done, in the past. And we have a celebrity podcast where we have had guests on such as Shaquille O'Neal, Mookie Betts, Pusha T,
Nice.
a plethora of athletes and entertainers. And really the cool thing there is you talk to a brother. Remember, we had Bradley Beal on. Brad was like, "Hey man, I got 45 minutes." You turn around, look up, it's 2 hours later, and that's because you're giving him an opportunity to not talk about how many threes he had last year or
Hmm.
how many points he had last week, but it's about his three boys and his wife, and why he gets up every day, and what really drives him and his relationship with his father. Saying that is amazing. So you get the chance to see these guys. You get to talk to Shaq about his stepfather and his father and what legacy and fatherhood means to him. We had a live podcast in Houston with Master P when his son first went to the University of Houston, and he talked about legacy and what it means to see his son go play Division I basketball at the University of Houston and that type of thing, man. And really, having these superheroes, these celebrities, in such a human light to where all of us as fathers we can relate to what they're talking about, you know what I'm saying, and see ourselves and see our
Mhm.
stories. and what they're saying, man. I think that's all important. We come from a ancestors that, being orators were huge, right? So, we're just really tapping into that, man, and making storytelling a huge part of what we do within our community.
Sweet.
Wow, that's powerful. What I hear is purpose. And that's one of the main things we like to speak about on the Lifeline podcast. It seems like you're really walking in your purpose. You mentioned legacy a couple of times, and legacy is big. I grew up without my father. My father died when I was 2. So some of the things that you were saying, and when I got opportunity to look at the platform, I was intrigued. I was amazed. I have 3 sons now. So me as a father, not having a father, always try to find resources for that. So I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing. So what is the legacy that you want to leave with dear fathers and dad to doulas?
Man, glad you asked that question, man. A huge. So I became a part of the team as I was entering fatherhood. My daughter was born May 18th of 2020, and everything I do with dear fathers, with dads to doulas, with straight mental, whatever it is, it's with my kids in mind. Like, I want them to be able to look at what their dad did and say that, my dad truly loved his community. He loved other people, and it was shown through his actions. One of my favorite programs that ever existed is the People's Free Food Program. And I look at how the Panthers took such a holistic view on something as simple as feeding children and making sure that they were nourished to go to school, to have better grades, and just, have more confidence by a simple meal. And everything I do program wise at Dear Fathers, including Dads to Doulas, is I think from a very simplistic view. Okay, we have these resources of, having this doula and Kyra that has all this experience and this knowledge. Let's create a program where we're just simply educating guys in a way that they had never been educated, but it's not a heavy lift. So I really want my legacy with this to be one that, impacts the outcomes of these families, that these women come out of these pregnancies safer, that the conversation around maternal health amongst Black men within the community is just as powerful as me talking about LeBron versus MJ. These are things that are real life affecting our families, but we're not talking about it. Well, with Dads to Doulas, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to solve some of these issues.
Yeah, I love that.
I think it is important that we have a platform for it. Like you was mentioned before we got on, that the guy at the gym saw the podcast, or he saw the television broadcast, and he was comfortable enough just to open up, and that opportunity to share with you from someone you've seen regularly, but he didn't go that deep in his personal life, but he saw what you were doing, and they just gave him the opportunity to open it up. And I think men always need a safe space.
Yeah,
100%.
I want to say thank you, because as we talked about before, I said, I'm a mental health advocate, and the older I get, the more I realize how damaged how many of us are. And so for you to create a platform for men to be healed emotionally is major. So I want to say thank you for that, having the foresight to do that.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's great. So what would be, as we're kind of starting to turn to the final leg of the podcast, what would be your message, man, to not just men out there, but just to the general public at large? Because I think men have been painted into a corner to where we're just maybe one dimensional. It's just all about success and the drive and the grind and stuff like here. But what you're saying, people are showing up to have conversations about life, family, mental health. So what will be like your message to our listeners about your initiatives and just men in general, of how there's more to us than what people have been led to believe?
Yeah, I think the message would be, don't be afraid to have those vulnerable moments. For my brothers, don't live in a silo. Um, you could have a buddy you talk to every day, and you never really take the time to ask, what I'm saying, how are you really doing, or just even expressing how you're truly feeling. Y'all could be going through the same thing, but because y'all not having that conversation, y'all suffering in silence right next to each other. And to me that's kind of, ridiculous. But again, like you said, Bo, that space isn't always created and felt by men. The one thing I found interesting when we would have straight mentals, is you have guys that I would have friends that I've known for 15 years, and they would come on, but because they felt so comfortable in that space, they would share something that they never shared with me. And I'm like, dang, bro, like I talk to you every day. Like, why you ain't never say that? Like, oh man, I don't know, but I felt really comfortable in this space. Okay, that's cool. I'm glad you got that off, but it just shows like when men feel comfortable with other men that they know are not going to judge them, they know are there to support them, and we're in this together. It's amazing the conversations, the empowerment, the encouragement. As Black men, we often look at each other like, we got to have this hard exterior on, and the mean mugs and all the rest of that silliness. And man, it's a lot of hurt in that mean mug and that stir and all that. And we really just need to embrace each other, man. We're in a space right now where we can't look at, the left or the right to come save us or come, do whatever in our communities. We really have to go back to a village mindset and pour into each other, support and uplift each other, man. So, man, it really takes nothing, man, to see a brother doing something and just reach out and, hey, bro, I see what you're doing, man. You know what I'm saying? Keep doing what you're doing. Or, hey, bro, congratulations on X, Y, and Z. I make it a point whenever I see someone that I'm friends with on social media and I see their son or daughter may have did something dope, or they may have some type of life changing experience. If I see them in person, I'm going to address that. I'm going to say, hey, man, I see X, Y, and Z, bro. Keep doing that, dog. I'm proud of you. Sometimes it's all we really need, man, but we got to open up and just be vulnerable enough to say that to one another.
Yeah, for real. That's for real there.
That's absolutely so. Before we end the podcast, Brad, man, we want to give our listeners an opportunity to be able to connect with you, either directly through social media, even connect to the initiatives that you are part of. That's the Doulas, Dear Fathers. How can people find you and connect with you, on social media and the internet?
Yeah, so on social media, they can connect to the platform at dear.fathers on Instagram, man. And our Instagram, man, is very robust. We're touching 15 million people every month. We have right around 440,000. And it's a lot of, it's a lot of celebrities, it's a lot of athletes, a lot of people that's tapping into the platform and to the content, because it's something that the guys really want to dig into, you know what I'm saying, and share. My personal is brad.m.edwards on Instagram, and our website is dearfathers.com, and on there you will find all of our storytelling series. You will find any of our events coming up. We do something called the Dear Fathers Nights with NBA franchise. We just did one recently in April with the Washington Wizards. That had an amazing showing from the community. The Dallas Mavericks has shown us a lot of love. Atlanta Hawks has been like a second home. And we're going to continue to grow that initiative going into 2026. We have a few new teams that we'll be adding to the roster. So, if you're looking for community, any of our events will offer that, man, as well as our programming with Dads to Doulas and Straight Mental.
Amazing,
man. That's amazing.
Great.
That's amazing. So,
Bo, can
glad to have
can
you
I
on
say
there.
something before?
Absolutely.
I want to say thank you for this, because a lot of times, we're in a day and time where influence is a big thing. So once you get to a certain number of followers, people get kind of, grand, if you will. They feel like they've arrived. And so I want to say thank you for being touchable.
Oh yeah, man. We got a long way to go on this thing still. Because we were birthed during the pandemic, a lot of what we've done has been virtual. But I'm a person, and so the rest of the guys, where we want to get out and really touch men and touch people within the community. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we're gearing up to do. We've done, done it with the Dear Father's Night, but a lot of this programming is about to be, really in person, man. So we have a lot of runway still, and I'm looking very much to the future and what we're gonna be able to accomplish here.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show and really sharing, what's really going on with men and what's happening in the community, and just how the shift has happened amongst men, the conversations that we're entering into, and looking for places that we can be vulnerable and have those type of conversations. So thank you so much for coming on. And to our listeners, this concludes another episode of The Lifeline with your hosts, BJE, Lynchburg Petway, and Bo Powell. Don't forget to check us out at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household, so join us and let us hear your feedback, because it's all about bringing life to you on The Lifeline. Y'all take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lynchburg Petway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on The Lifeline. God bless.